Hi, I'm John Doe. I have no idea what we're talking about. But anyway, this is Ben Keating from Brooklyn, New York on the Bonsai Podcast with Kevin and Ryan.
Welcome to the Bonsai Time Podcast, the tree hugger's #1 spot for history, horticulture, and having fun. This is your host, Ryan, and today's episode spans all three of these categories, as Kevin interviews Benjamin Keating to discuss his history in bonsai, horticultural challenges involved in displaying bonsai as fine art, and the latest ways that Ben is having fun combining trees with his metal sculptures. Moreover, a recurring question they discussed is what could the world of fine art give back to or teach bonsai artists? Ben discusses some ideas, but the question remains open. Check out our show notes for pictures of Ben's work, and if you would like to follow along in Ben's garden tour that he gave to Kevin, see the YouTube version of this interview, also linked in the show notes. With that, I have one last note before we dive into today's episode. We received a question via Spotify, but we learned that this is a one-way communication. So we would like to let that viewer or listener know we received the question and will incorporate it into another Bonsai Brainstorm episode to be released in late February. Anyone else with questions for that or a future Bonsai Brainstorm episode, please use the form on our website or DM us pictures of your trees. At this time of year, pot pairing exercises could be especially useful to think ahead on. Now, back to the Bonsai Time Podcast.
Right. What were you doing in Oregon? That's where I'm originally from. Born and raised there.
I was flying out there to install the sculpture.
Right. The PBM, right?
Bought into, but
yeah.
So that was to go out there and kind of my introductory into the Pacific Northwest bonsai world. So very great to introduce me and drive me around to all the different guys out there, you know. So it was like a 3-day crash course on bonsai. And Aaron
out there
7 a.m. till 9 o'clock at night we were out, you know, doing bonsai. It was fantastic though. I really want to get back there soon.
Yeah, Aaron's a really good dude. I've known him for a while now. Yeah, and there's nothing really like the Pacific Northwest, especially just how much of a vastness of bonsai there is. You know, it's like this weird incubator right now.
It also was like to get it all so fast, right? So like I show up at the museum, and him and I have been talking for a while, and so I get to see their protocol, right? You know, and like how they take care of the stuff and the trees. And then the next day we're at Randy's, and then like his way of doing it, right? Then we're at Ryan's, and then he's his way of doing it. And then the last day we're at Dan's. If I can't say that there was not much in common between those guys other than bonsai, you know, I guess, you know, Aaron and Ryan, those guys and Randy, but it was amazing how the depth of like creativity and then the like lack of thought for some things and overthought other things, yet everyone was at the same endeavor, but the differences were huge, especially between the guys there, you know? And operating, so to speak.
It's funny you went to Dan Robbins, right outside of Seattle.
When I first started thinking about sculpture and bonsai, I always say it wrong. It's my Brooklyn accent. You got to forgive me.
You're good.
But so it was for some reason, I guess being an American, being like, you know, my family's been in since 1898, you know, so I guess we've been in Brooklyn since 1890. So I'm like Brooklyn is like where I'm from, you know, 100 years. So I looked up, the first thing I Googled, like when I wanted to start working with trees, and first thing I Googled was American bonsai.
Okay.
So where does that lead you to, right? Exposure was Dan Robinson.
Yeah.
For bonsai, you know, and I kind of I went on a steadfast mission to contact everyone in the industry but Dan, because I was kind of scared of him.
He's quite the personality. It's funny you say that. My co-host Ryan, he wasn't able to join us today. He actually studied with Dan when he was in college at University of Washington in Seattle. He studied with him off and on for 4 years or so, 3 to 4 years, and then he goes relatively regularly back and helps out and does continuing ed, so to speak. And right. I think it was 2 years ago now already. I was afforded the invite by Ryan, vouching for me that I'm a good dude. I'm here to work. Got to go out there for 3 days or so, and yeah, that whole experience with Dan is a whole another level of. It's hard to take in, and Ryan's is the same way, and Randy's, but like
I guess they all were hard to take in. Dan for me was the easiest to take in. Given
right.
Well, I think it's a lot to do with, again, my aesthetic as an American artist, where there's a bit of disregard that America kind of tends to pioneer. That's very different, and then there's also the fact that I'm a full-time sculptor, right? So if Dan says, like, you don't need to repot, kid, it's like, well, let me try that, or, so it's like, okay, and like, okay, let that branch die, or like, well, look at, like, just so that it always resonated with me. But I'm a geek too, and I want to, like, learn the right thing to do as well.
Right.
So I'm kind of as a beginner, and I will remain a beginner in bonsai. That's not to cause myself any trouble. I still struggle between the two. Yet I gravitate towards Dan's approach because I have 3 kids, I have a career.
Right.
And, his idea of, like, letting the tree do its thing, and the beauty of it, like, remaining on death's door, I guess. I don't know if that's a proper way to say it.
No, that definitely is I don't want to say trademark, but definitely an aesthetic to some of Dan's work, where it's that gnarly, like he says, right? Gnarly. And this old, did he point out the trees to you that were across the street that were like, see those ones with the tops broken off? Those are the oldest ones, and the ones next to them are the younger ones.
Headlock conversation.
Yeah.
And I get that too, and it's like, so the whole idea of where he's at, I guess, is remarkable to me because of the again, it's that the lack of, like, following the rules.
Yeah, the lack of control, right?
Right. And also, like, and it was really nice to go there with Aaron, because I don't really understand like, if a hemlock or something like that, the color of the leaves. So, like, Aaron's kind of was navigating the fact that, like, look, man, a hemlock in any other collection wouldn't have yellow leaves, yet this thing has had yellow leaves for 35 years.
Yeah.
So it's really, like, to leave the Pacific, to start at the museum and then go through that whole thing and end up at Dan's was, like, epic. I think we spent 5 hours there.
Yeah, no, that's a short amount of time, I would say.
And we were leaving, and he, like, chased us out. Let me show you the azaleas on the way out. And I jump out of the car, okay, let's go.
Well, and the thing with his spot too, the history of it, right?
Garbage dump thing, and
that's amazing in itself. And now his son does a lot of the curatorial rock art and sculptures and things, and
I didn't get a chance to meet the son, unfortunately.
He's a good guy.
Wasn't in town, but we got to see his shop too, which was super cool. And
big old saw and everything.
Yeah.
That thing was huge.
The rock into it, which is, like, super cool. Become, like, the work that I do is very much like that. And that's kind of the other thing with making cast metal sculpture. Shoveling sand and all that stuff is, like, kind of what I do as a daily. So, like, the and then the money in it and all that stuff, and to hear Dan say, like, why are you buying all that soil for, and then get into the bulging moss and the beauty of that, which really, like, that level of, that's not in anyone else's work from where I see, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because moss isn't going to exist, and then breaking out of the pot like that doesn't exist unless you're not, you're right. So it's like, and that's kind of like my first 3 or 4 trees that I have here look like that, because I'm lax in my, what do you want to call it? I would call cleanliness or
Oh, you're a dad. You're a dad. You're a dad.
I'm a bad bonsai dad. Yeah.
Like, how do I, manage everything? So there are things that would get behind you, but within that experience, does that make you want to go a little deeper into the platform of learning more about all the aesthetics and the plantings and the formative seasonal work that takes place with bonsai? Or is it more just approach of like, oh, I know what I can jump on and kind of do my own thing with?
I think that the whole thing going out west, particularly prior to that, I was afraid to work on trees that were like more valuable, let's say, and after coming home from there, I messed up a bunch of stuff right away. And it's because I've been kind of relying on the garden's getting less healthy because I'm trying to rely more on my own instead of like on professionals and having help. And going out there, I guess I realized, like, look, man, you could like lose a branch or two, or like maybe like I lost my first tree this year.
Yeah.
And I have 150 back here.
Ooh, that's a lot.
Yeah, nothing, it's like nothing's really, hold on, I can span you around. It's not all, how do I flip this? I'm really bad on Zoom.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah. So like everything is not.
Those are nice.
I mean, that's like, it's just, and there's some like stuff like this. And then, this is a pretty cool,
nice little spruce.
Spruce. And this is some of the nicer stuff. But then there's like this thing that I got out of a national park in Maine that was like on the road, and it was getting run over. And then this white pine, or like, this is a nice tree. But then there's this like weird stuff like this. This was a eastern white pine that was growing, and it was like, I don't know, it was like 10 feet tall and had all these spines. I just cut it in half and tied it all into a knot.
That's
weird.
Awesome.
And then there's like this pit of like, gosh, there's a Scots pine there, elm, this giant crepe myrtle down there that like has a massive base, this ridiculous boxwood that has a really, beautiful trunk. And then you can see crepe myrtle amongst the weeds here. It's huge. But again, like, look at these weeds, Kevin. Like, this is bad practice. This is a tree here that when I got home from, this is one of the first trees I got. It's an elm collected out here. This is like, I decided to just gnaw on it. Like, damn, I came from the Pacific Northwest. This is the first thing I did. And I was just like, like, look, and then I'm kind of watching. It's alive up here. There's barely, and I forgot when I was getting into it, you have to leave, like, you can't like get rid of all the outside. You're going to kill the top, but it's kind of going,
Yeah. And with deciduous trees too, they're pretty high water moving. So I'm sure Dan may have showed you that tree that kind of calloused itself on the inside back over.
Yeah.
Which is an astonishing thing to see. I was like, what in the heck? I've never seen that. No, those look awesome. You got some great work. And I think that too, I was looking at your photos or your gallery showings and stuff. From what I've seen from your trees and just your style and points, it's very fitting. Well, that's cool. That is an awesome. Wow, that's die cast. That's cool.
This tree, I just broke a major limb off because I was pushing it far, but kind of everywhere. It's not, there's like a kind of a lot of hodgepodge and, kind of ducked down everywhere. And this is a Japanese white pine that was dying. And I had it started budding this year. It was dying in an old man's garden. It pushed this year, but it just quit the bed. This is like my planting I did. It's a rose and a tiny elm. Like, I think it's going to be something someday,
Very cool.
All sorts, like a big, it just keeps on going. I kind of went nuts, This is planting I did this year. It's going to take 15 years for that to be cool,
That's awesome.
It's going to take a while, a limber pine, a Bristol cone. This we just back from Randy, and that was Todd. I finished this container yesterday.
That's awesome.
A new one. It's just all scrap, they kind of keep going. I think this is the second tree that I got. Was I collected this one from a graveyard
just a San Jose juniper that they would get. More stuff here, and this is a cool little sculpture here that needs a base. It keeps falling over.
That's
Another
cool.
Sculpture hanging out here with this really weird Engelman,
That's cool.
bizarre Engelman, and then that just like doesn't stop here.
You definitely have enough to keep you busy.
Yeah, this is a redwood that I've been leaving outside in 10-degree weather, trying to get acclimated. It came back, I just leave it outside. I'm trying to get it to be. This is another sculpture I just finished with a tiny elm.
That's really cool.
Another one. This tree has to get done, and I mean, it's kind of. This is a really cool. This is a root graft from Marty. I forget the gentleman's last name. I can't say it properly. The big guy from starts with an S. This is the tree that's dying on me.
Yeah. Certain cultivars of maples are finicky. I had one of those.
I probably should have stayed away from it. This is another tree I got for free. It was like a 10-tree planting that died. A lot of this stuff I get larches and the giant redwood here that I really don't know what to do with this. Another larch, and this is another tree of Marty's. And this is the first tree I collected. You can't really see it, but it was growing on the side of the road in the Bronx, and it was covered with plastic bags.
Oh, wow.
Up here. And I saw like this little thing on the side of the road coming out of and I geolocate stuff, and then I dug the plastic out from underneath, and there's a really cool tree in there.
Nice.
But third casualties of showing art.
Yeah.
Someone tried to steal this tree here. A really cool Engelman that was worked on for a lot of years. You could see where the guy, we have him on video. You can see where the handprint is.
Oh, yeah.
You see right there.
Yeah.
Where he grabbed it. And this thing, I could have held it upside down when I installed it. You see how it got loose out of the root?
Yep.
He probably, so that's kind of one of the problems with showing this stuff is I thought I came into this tree and I was like, why is it all falling off? And this one, I don't know, it kicked the bucket. But again, I'm trying to show these things indoors for, I mean, gosh, like this thing was indoors for 1.5 months. Oof. And yeah, I think that kind of part of the deal with with this stuff, what we're doing, there's a bit of decay, but I think that the more I do it, I'm kind of learning how to show trees indoors for more time, right? There's not how many people have shown bonsai indoors for like 3 months, right?
I don't know of any. And that's the thing too, is I think if they would have, or if they have, they probably have it somewhere outside when it's maybe closed or something, just to get that affiliation of air and stuff. And depending on season too, right? Because man.
So like that's kind of all the stuff that I feel like maybe that'll be somewhere where I could add to the community,
right?
Because it's like that's what I'm trying to learn how to do.
No, that's a good starting point. And that's too, in those ideas of, we need more open gallery museums, my personal belief, because of the fact that you have these living art pieces, right? When you're enclosed, it's always that non-permanent acceptance of weather, right? But now with it having open, like the Pacific Bonsai Museum, right? That's an open air museum. It works.
Right.
It's like boom. But man, you got a nice little backyard for how much trees you got.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that it's and I have a big front yard too. So that always helped, in Brooklyn here. This is kind of a lot of space for Brooklyn,
Right. So I was wondering, so are you originally from Brooklyn, or have you lived anywhere else? Were you born there? What was that?
Yeah, I mean, this house here, you see, I've kind of rebuilt a good portion of it, but I built that chimney. This house my great-great-grandfather bought off the boat from Italy. Came with $1 in his pocket. He was a machinist. Wow. And he bought the place in 1898. It was built for a Republican club, and it didn't have a bathroom and a shower. And I don't know, he came here with like $1 in his pocket. But he was a machinist. So in like 3 years, he had a job. So he bought it then. And then I had to like beg, borrow, and steal to buy it from my dad when my grandmother passed. I lived here I took care of her for 8 years in the house. She if you see my other work, I've been making the whole house in metal.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that process in regards to like that show is very inspiring. From, I watched a little bit of the video you walked through that was on Facebook, and then, just in the process of that, has that contributed to more of an aesthetic for you to feel like you're connected with people by art now through your family?
I think what that show opened up for me, for something that I was always into art on a level of like kind of trying to be experimental, trying to be avant-garde, trying to do something new. But that was the first time I showed my heart in my art. And I've been making art for a lot of years. I mean, I'm 40 something now. And that was the first time I exposed myself. And the trees have become an extension of that in a way.
Awesome.
It's more personal, it's not as like an abstract object. What do I have? Like something like in here, there's not a lot of human in some of these pieces of mine, like the older abstract pieces, like something like this. Yeah, pardon the mess. There's another tree that perished in the longhouse. We have a show up at the longhouse, and they put it indoors in 60 degrees of boxwood. And it didn't make it, but like a piece like this, it's crazy. It just becomes so. The grandma show and all this stuff was more of, I guess, personal,
No, that's really cool, because that's a lot of inspiration just for everything else going forward, right? But also too, I mean, you have quite an extensive and vast foray of what you've done. From, I was looking at your resume and stuff. You've created a foundry, is that correct? Like,
one of we
grant-based programs. And
we were one of the only teaching foundries. I mean, we taught at Columbia. I've taught at SVA, Pratt Institute, lectured all over. So we were one of the few foundries that actually extended all my knowledge to students,
nice.
Which was kind of cool. And then we also did production work for some of the greatest artists in the country for the past 20 years. I started that when I was like 20 something. I think I was 23. I worked for a big factory. I come from pretty much middle class to poor Brooklyn. We don't have a lot of money. So this big factory was closing, and I literally signed like almost $1 million worth of work without having a shop, took the deposits, got a building, and built the factory. Nice. And here we are like 20 years later, and I've decided to close the factory and just focus on the bonsai sculpture and my own sculpture. And I'm not even teaching any longer.
Okay. I was going to say, because so you started doing the foundry kind of stylistic artwork at 20, right? But then how did you even get into art? Or did you get inspired by your grandma, your parents, family? Who got you from when you were a kid and whatnot?
I was a poet from a very young age, and you could look it up and you could see some poems of mine published. And it was always hard to make a living as a poet.
Right. So
I decided to go into forestry, and I enrolled in environmental science and forestry out in Syracuse. I didn't get in, but I got into Morrisville, which had like a satellite program for there. And I went and did that. And my dad bought me a book for Christmas. Remember the books that used to be like before the web? It was like, if you want to be a lawyer, here are all the jobs that you could get, And it was like forestry. And the biggest job was like 16 grand, 17 grand or something. So I decided I might as well just stick to poetry. So I dropped out of that and went to Brooklyn College for a moment to meet Allen Ginsberg and study with him.
Oh, wow.
And then I went to Oswego to study with this guy, Lou Turco, who was the only comprehensive book of poetry forms out there. It's a book of every form. And called Poetry Boot Camp. You had to write Nyamba Pentamina, you had to write Sistina, you had to write all these, like it was a really tough class. And so I went there to study that. And my last year, they wouldn't let me take any more English classes. So I was like, I want to take sculpture. And the guy wouldn't let me in the class. And he had this foundry. It was all like, he was like 80 at the time, Nick D'Incenzo, and it was covered in trash. And I was like, foundry, I don't know, something rang with me. And, I used to make sculptures when I was a kid in metal until my mom caught me with a torch. And like that ended so quick. I was like burning cigarettes and metal and making like, I don't know, it was like, I grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood in Flatbush. And one of my friend's brothers got out of jail and taught us how to make jail knives out of cigarettes, and started making these like Calderesque mobiles with cigarettes. My mom saw me with the torch and the cigarettes, and the crack years were going on. And she flipped out.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of the end of my sculpture career at a real young age.
Mm.
And then I saw this foundry, and the guy wouldn't let me in the class. I cleaned it up, invited him back down. I got the thing running. He was like, the guy started crying. He's like, you can come in the class. And I dropped out of college, dude.
Oh, wow.
And, I took one class in the foundry. I got it up and running again. He wrote a letter to my teachers that semester to get me the pass. And the second semester, the teacher's like, look, he has to come to class. And Nick was just like, he's in the studio all day, all night. I stopped going out, and I would like jog from the studio to home past the bars. And my friends were like, Keating, where you going? No time. And I'd just be like, and, I left college, and there was a huge foundry school run by Sue Johnson of the Johnson & Johnson family in Trenton. And, they were only hiring guys with degrees, masters at the time. I just showed up there, and I did. There was trucks leaving the yard, and it was like there was all dirt in the yard. So I went and found the maintenance area, grabbed the broom, started sweeping up. The president of the company came out. I was like, who told you to sweep the street? And I was like, I don't know, sir. I just see you have trucks coming and going. I can't get an interview here. He's like, you don't work here? I was like, no, sir. I'm just cleaning your street. I want to work here. And he's like, I'm taking lunch. It's going to be a fast one because I met you. Come back to the office. And I said, I don't have a degree. They won't. He goes, don't worry. And they put me in there, and I excelled there. I was coming in from Brooklyn every day to Trenton, New Jersey to work. I was getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning and taking the train 3 hours to get there, and, coming back home, looking after grandma and heading out the next day. And I just that energy kind of built me as someone who was somebody there. So when they closed, they shut down the foundry. A lot of the big clients were like floundering, and I said, hey, I could do the work. Give me a shot. And that's back to the story where I signed like close to $1 million in work in 1 week and just quit the job before they closed and opened up.
Real quick. I knew what a foundry was. I have friends that do all different kinds of art, but there may be some people that are listening that don't know what a foundry is. Can you briefly describe what the function is and what you do primarily at the foundry?
Melt metal and, cast it into forms, various forms, whatever they may be. So the foundry of sense is just a place where metal is melted and formed. Forging, is a place where metal is forged, right? The metal is heated and hammered, where when you founder metal, it's melted down, And kind of one of the kicks to the foundry is everything comes in as bricks and bags of sand and stuff like that. And we turn it into sculpture. So it's truly like high level industrial kind of production, whereas things are coming in sand and turning out as product. There's no pre-fixed items coming and put back together. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, that's definitely from the ground
primary,
up.
Yeah, ground up production, and that's what a foundry is. And it was the reason I went towards that as an artist was because the foundry was if you look at a lot of my work, you'll notice it really wouldn't work in any other material other than metal. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that was the primary focus to me going towards foundry.
So then how do you, jumping forward, how do you start showcasing your own work? And then, have you always been in the trees at this time? Or was there a moment where you're just like, hey, because I read that you want to do a bronze tree, but you're like, that's going to be so much money. I can't do it.
And so many other artists have done it before, and they killed trees. And you have Mark Quinn that did the bonsais. And so I was researching the idea of trees, Giuseppe Pignone, and then I found Nick Lentz. Dan Robinson, Nick Lentz. Then this is where the idea of Ben Keating as a bonsai practitioner starts. When I see Dan Robinson, then I see Nick Lentz, and I'm like, oh, there's room for me in this space. It's it was a big kind of awakening, like, wow. Moreover, that there was artistic room is what really pushed me to keep pushing, because in the art world, there's not much room left,
Right.
For creativity currently especially in this time of year. So bonsai seemed like a kind of a open market for the avant-garde.
Yeah, I would say there's I always tell people out in America, it's the Wild West, and
or as does like a lot of these professionals like Owen Reich or Ryan or Bjorn that spent 7 years in Japan. I mean,
right,
you know,
right.
like you can't wipe that out, right?
You know, the traditional sense of why, like you were talking about when you were over there, seeing all the things and then realizing or having this realization, oh, okay, that does make sense why I need to kind of tend to these seasonal factors more too, right? And so it's a good standing point, but also, like you said, there is definitely room to create more, and we don't have the cultural dynamic of Japan because we're not Japanese, right? And
Right.
yeah, it's almost like the Wild West or Wild US as our geography, you know, replicates what we want to do with our bonsai trees, right?
Right. Well, isn't there a story about Dan and how he like brought out a chainsaw and was like thrown out of Japan, and then like years later they saw his trees were still alive and they were like, oh shit, come back, kind of thing, right?
I don't know if it was Japan specifically. I know of his stories with many chainsaws from other people I know, and things in that way. And he said he brought it out, and then he got kicked out of he got kicked out of a convention or demonstration. They're like, get out of here. And then everyone else, you know, yeah, he did a lot of stuff. There's a gentleman named Chase Rosade over in New Hope, PA. And
yeah, you know, he's so close to me. I haven't gotten a chance to get there yet.
You should get there. His stuff's great. He's got good stories. We have some podcasts with him. I'm actually set to go see him in a couple weekends and help him with some trees up there. And he's been doing bonsai since 1953. Dan's been around the same amount of time, you know, and with the knowledge that they have just of their experience, it just proliferates this idea of what more can we do, right? And I'm excited to see what you have coming on, because when I saw Aaron put on the Avant Garden display and things in that way, that was just so intriguing to me, because I've always been interested in this idea of man, not necessarily versus nature, but the implication of man on nature or vice versa. And how does that intake for you with this idea of using your metal sculpture or metal process, and then having this something non-metal living standard? Not that metal isn't living, you know, thinking about it with atoms and whatnot, but in this idea of physically living to actually growing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess time is the connection between bonsai and sculpture, because like there is the idea of time and sculpture. With that, more time is better sculpture. Same with bonsai, right? You know, So like there's that where that was like a strict connection, and there are a lot of rules in foundry, you know, as far as the sculpture is concerned. So like there are a lot of like similarities, but there's also a lot of differences, you know. And I guess I'm straying from the question.
Well, no, in regards to that we're just chatting, and you know, within that idea of rules, you know, I would think they're in place so people don't get burned up, because in foundry work that seems a really hot temperature, right? So do you think within your bonsai creation now you're available to have more freedom because you don't have such set standard practice like you do in foundry?
That's kind of like the whole feeling I feel about all of this. It's freeing me up on both sides.
Good.
Yeah, and I think that the acceptance of Aaron was a big kind of loggerheads is the right word. It just sounds good, but it was like that was like kind of like, oh, okay. And then to have someone have that museum be willing to invest in this idea of who knows what, right? You know, it was like, what is this? And to take a chance was like, that was a big kind of step forward for me, because I hadn't had the opportunity to work with other than stuff like this, right? You know, like, so that was the level. And I had been contacting a lot of the bigger guys and saying like, hey, can I get a tree? And it kind of wasn't going anywhere from that perspective, because who wants to put a tree in my container that's worth big money if they don't know if this container can work, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So when Aaron was willing to take that chance, and him and I kind of collaborated on that concept, that was like kind of like, I was like, oh wait, you know, there really is space here, you know. I mean, I can't lie, it's my first major museum acquisition. There's a couple of my pieces that'll be going to major museums in New York that were bought for me from big collectors, but they're in their living rooms right now. One of the biggest collectors in New York, Ben, when I pass, it goes to the Whitney. Ben, when I pass, it goes to the MoMA. But as of current, the Pacific Bonsai Museum is my first permanent acquisition.
That's awesome.
In a museum,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right. So it becomes like, and for someone who's been trying to get in the museums of the art world for 20 plus years, to step into this genre and to be accepted so fast was kind of incredible,
Well, and that's the thing, quoting a friend here, it says, when you do good things or good work, people see it. They don't necessarily understand why at first, but they want more of it. And I'll say for me, when I saw your work, I was like, this speaks to me because this is similar to like my liking, and that's exciting to see that you have the opportunity. Like, did he search you out or did you contact Aaron, or how did that approach?
I think I cold grammed him.
I like that.
I'm a poet. That's a new term. Coined on Bonsai Podcast. I cold grammed them, and that was it. Yeah, I saw a lot of. There's other artists that are doing it, and for me, what I knew it would set me apart is I knew that I had the space in my brain to really, and I care. I've grown plants my whole life, so I knew that. I didn't think, and I almost know that I don't think there's going to be another sculptor that's going to put the time in that I've been willing to put in the last 4 years. And again, I say I'm still a beginner after hours of Marai and studying with Jim Doyle and studying with the host of guys that he's brought around and women. There's an enormous amount of time I've spent studying this craft. And I don't know if another sculptor is really going to get into that, man,
right? Because there's that divide, like we're talking about. What time do you put in for what? Because you have so much going on already outside of your bonsai practice and your sculpting.
Well, beyond that is, Kevin, there's also the idea of like, I can't take a good picture, right? I can't, certain things I can't do well, certain things I can do well, but I already have a green thumb, So that's another problem. Like, how many sculptors have a green thumb? Because you're not gonna really play with bonsai if you can't grow a good tomato, or like, you know what I mean?
For sure. No, this is true, because it's hard. You can teach it, but it comes in the application, right?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a certain, like with everything in life, there's a certain of it built into your DNA or not.
Yeah, I agree.
And like, so I always knew I was a plant guy. And then this tree idea came, and then the idea was to work with big trees, which I did. I don't know if you ever saw the picture. I uprooted a 20-something foot maple raft that I found on the side of the road.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, that'll be planted. We're trying to find the permanent location. It's in the parking lot of my gallery right now.
Oh, wow.
And we'll be styling. I'll send you the pictures of the tree. And I uprooted it last year. It's growing well this year, so it's ready to be styled. I have a whole concept that, do you know Chris Scott from Maine, bonsai artist, amateur?
Sounds familiar. I think I may have heard the name in passing. I don't know him personally.
Big pitch pine guy, under the radar dude, but he's going to help me kind of style this tree. Because again, I think a lot of where I'm at with this is I'm a sculptor, and again, I'm not sure I want to get past beginner with this stuff. Maybe in concept and in theory in my mind, but I'm not looking to be a professional bonsai art, Right. So whereas a lot of other artists like that are working in the medium or have played with the bonsai medium, you'll see they make pieces with trees, and there's no mention of the potter. There's no mention of the artist that designed the tree, right? It's the name of the piece is like My Desire or whatever, right? So like, okay, so someone grew this juniper, you cast it in bronze, someone made that pot, whether it's just an antique Japanese vessel, but the tenets of bonsai are container by, tree by, originally established by, collected by, right? And in art, we tend to steal a lot. And
it's like
for me, yeah, dude, like, so for me, this was like an opportunity to say, wow, I could collaborate with some of the best bonsai artists in America with my containers if I could just make these things so damn pretty that they can't say no. So That's just what I'm trying to do.
That's awesome. And it really does open a new playing field, especially for a lot of people that, I don't want to say it's stifled, but sometimes it gets cloudy and, that interpretation of like, oh, is this offsetting from the tree or pairing together, right? And
right.
That's really cool because of the fact that you've already got your first iteration and piece into the PBM, which is a huge museum. I think you can only go forward from there, especially with the support of that group. Because
we're working on a kinetic one right now for them.
Say again?
We're working on a kinetic sculpture, bonsai sculpture for the Pacific Bonsai Museum now.
That's awesome.
It's going to be, it's a ponderosa that's going to go into this kind of, for lack of a better word, a choo-choo train. And it's kind of, there's going to be a turntable built into the composition. So like back to that, so the more I study bonsai, the more I could figure a way to give you guys a better container. So how about a container that rotates? So you don't need, cool. Right? Or it moves, right? So it's on wheels. So so now you have a heavy tree. So it has a dolly built into it, and it has a turntable built into it.
That's awesome. That would save a lot of backs.
Right? This is where I feel like I really need to study with all the better guys in bonsai, because that's the way for me to kind of navigate on how to make the container. I mean, where I'm at now is it was complete disregard in the beginning, but now it's wait, maybe the avant-garde could help the bonsai artist. With this, if we develop this thing that no one's ever seen before, but it has a turntable in it, right? Stuff like this. And the Pacific Bonsai piece, I put irrigation down the back of the sculpture, so the water, it's a vertical planting, but there's a pipe with holes drilled in the back of the planter, so when you pour water in, it goes directly to the middle and back of the roots. Wow. You know what I mean? Because if you're pouring on a vertical planting, it doesn't want to get to that furthest point back in the planter, right?
Right, gravity pulling down.
Right. So the water, there's a funnel in the back of the planter with a pipe that goes down the back. So all the water gets funneled to the back of the roots. And it's not a problem because it's not a flat planting. So the gravity is going to pull the water anyway, right? But this way the whole root structure gets soaked. And that was the big kind of take back from working with Aaron, was taking the, as he calls it, avant disregard, and maybe a way of making it regard, right? And to establish a equitable practice of avant-garde art and bonsai, where the shape and the abstraction of the idea can maybe help the horticulture of the plant. Maybe.
That's a really cool, that's thinking about it horticulturally. I'm in school for that, and I was thinking it hits all the points. If you have an access point for water to specifically go into an area that wouldn't necessarily have a lot of water ability and access, you're already 20% there just with the capacity of water holding, right? In regards to
I mean, honestly, I don't know of any vertical planting out there. Does anyone else have a pipe feeding the water to what would be the sheen area of the tree?
I haven't seen it personally. I was gonna say, I was gonna say Jim Doyle is a good friend. I was thinking, does Jim have anything? I know he's got some quirky stuff, but I don't know of any. I know people that have vertical plantings, but it's in that idea where it's just you water it.
Well, they're sitting there dumping, and especially we can even get into conservation, right? So for me to water a rock planting or a vertical planting, I'm dumping gallons of water out, man, to saturate that plant. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? If you have that funnel in there. So all these things, that's kind of where I'm kind of grooving now. And that's why we were making the other planter for the Bonsai Museum there anyway. And I started to kind of move in this direction with Aaron just this week. Actually, I was like, Aaron, what if we did a turntable and then he's like, what about I said, what if it moves for you? And he's like, what about a train car? And so it's that the development, the more I could work with professional bonsai artists, the better I could do.
Right.
And the more I could learn.
No, definitely. And that just opens doors to so many different other platforms and show ideas. Have you been to the national show? There's the one up in Rochester.
No, I really want to get out there. I have like 50 containers that I made in ceramic that I want to drop to, and I wanted to get out there and bring them, but it's a lot for me to bear with emails and stuff. And Jim Doyle, who's been one of my teachers, sent me Bill's, email address, and it's the 3 kids, man. It's like, how am I going to get to Rochester?
I feel it. No, it's happening this year in September. I didn't know if you're able to go because of like, I'll be there.
I have to go. I think I was trying to I thought that it would be good if I have a table there, but I just stopped when I'm very bad sometimes when it comes to emails,
No, it's hard.
I didn't have to ask, really, truthfully. It was kind of one of those shy things where I'm not sure if I belong there yet. Like the same thing with not contacting Dan 5 years in yet, maybe the rush to the Nationals is a lot,
I will say, from my experience within Bonsai, I started in 2016, 2017 or so. And when I say started, I mean, I'm still learning, always learning, right? Always a student. I've had the most access and ability just to get in connection with people through Bonsai, and they were the most open. Most of the time the idea is, we may think, myself personally, I could just, like I heard you say, oh, I don't know if I'm there yet. There will be people ready for it, because there's plenty of people that are inspired by work but also want to do something different too, not just to be different, but to have that appreciation of like, oh, let's progress it forward. You know what I mean? So I was gonna say, if you can, I can introduce you to more people. It's like, come on up, let's go. Oh, September 9th.
Jim was a great resource too.
I was gonna say, did you just contact him and call him after you were searching, or is he just like some Bonsai near me kind of thing?
No, well, again, like I was back channel stuff, so I found Dan, and then I found Randy, and then I was looking to get stuff from Randy, but he doesn't ship and all that stuff. And then I found out that a bunch of Randy stuff was at Jim, so that sent me to Jim. That's how I found Jim. I found Randy before I found Jim.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really weird, right? He's been very gracious too, Randy, with his time. I sent him some pictures of sculptures when I first started, and he got right back to me.
He's a great guy.
Super gracious. And he sent me a couple of plants since I've gotten to know him that were really like the one behind me that I showed you, that Todd style, that the level of stuff that I need to get to. And then going to see him really woke me up as to what I can do. But again, like the yard's not that big. I mean, I can't really to why I need other bonsai artists to work with. It's like to sculpt the tree. I can't wait 20 years. So I need you guys, if that makes sense.
So do you see yourself focusing more with creating the dynamic vessel, or not even dynamic vessel, but there's the vessel, and then having the artist interpret, and then having that time together? Or do you want to also have your trees within your own vessels too?
Yeah, you'll see them 20 years from now. But as far as for the next 10 years, it's, working with everyone else. Like that little tree I just showed you. It's basically Nick Lentz circa when he was 20, when he first started. What, puppy? There's not going to be, I realized that in order for me to see my vision, it's going to take 20 years, right?
Right. Patience is key. That's what the trees teach us.
Yeah. So it's like, and whether or not I'm alive in 20 years, I don't have time for that. Although I am starting them, like these little things. And I think or this one in 20 years, like what the hell is that going to look like if I follow Dan's routine and just not replant it, right? Or this tree, the same thing. But they have to grow in, and more importantly, like this one here, what's like when that comes out of that, and like, it's just a stupid little pine, but that bronze, it's wrapped inside of it. It's going to continue to get wrapped, right? Or like the same thing with this tree too. I just planted all these words in the trident maple here, and
that's cool.
That it's cool now, but in 20 years, it's going to be something real, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And within time and time again, right?
Right. And time again. And there's like the weeds that I pulled 3 days ago that I haven't gotten off the floor, Not a very, very, very cleansly museum here, you know?
Oh, it's all good. Work in progress, you know. How often are you getting out to other people's gardens around you? Have you been to the Brooklyn Botanical?
Yeah, since a kid, I've been going there.
Okay.
You know?
So you got to see the bonsai and whatnot there too?
Yeah. For years, I don't live that far. I could walk to the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens from my house.
Oh, nice. With
Yeah.
the question I ask a lot since we are 3 years out of quarantine. How did you do with quarantine? Did you focus more on your art, new ideas? Did you go to your trees?
Well, that was
what did you do?
quarantine was when I realized I don't want to teach or make other people's art anymore. I just want to focus on myself.
Yeah, you've had a
Quarantine
long
shut
time.
down. Well,
Exactly.
Well, it shut down my business, right? So there was for 2.5 years, I made a living off of not making a living. So I was like, oh, back to kind of that idea of when I quit forestry school. It's like, if I'm going to be broke, I might as well just do my own thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was this is weird, because this is like some weird elm I've been growing in my concrete for like a bunch of years. And I have to redo this concrete sooner or later. So when I do it, this thing will get dug up, and I don't know, what is that? It's an elm, right?
Can't really tell. My camera's a bit fuzzy. May just want to Google Lens it and be like, what is this, Google?
I gotta get that. I see, again, I'm bad with the net. I have none of that stuff, you know?
No, you're good. I just, I'm 35 now, going back to school, and all my peers are in their 1920. I'm just like, wow, it's a different perspective, right? But in regards to that application of community, my co-host Ryan and I, he's going to school for his PhD in microbiology. We just started the first ever bonsai club at the Ohio State University. And that just has garnered so much more community involvement, to where we're trying to get more people to see it as art, because is it art versus craft, or craft and an art, you know what I mean? And we're also trying the application of just helping students decompress from stress. And there's a lot of students coming in now asking about what other things can be done with bonsai. And, you're a great example, because not that there's anything been just stalemating bonsai, but there are certain times that I've seen in history of American bonsai that have shifted it into a completely different propulsion. You know what I mean?
I think we're at that paradigm shift now, with everything that Marai's doing, and everything that where Bjorn is at, and the fact that we probably, not that I know this, but I've heard this from other professionals, that we probably have with Randy and Andy and Dan and all these collectors, and arguably Randy might be the best tree collector in the history of the world, right? Potentially. There was a guy in, so we're at this point in America where we really, like, where else in the world, maybe in, there's that woman in Europe that's pulling all those trees, right? But
yeah,
I mean, where this is like probably at the apex of Japan, when the emperor was there getting the guys to dig these trees out, right? It's like we're at that point right now in American bonsai where, geez, I mean, there's like a boiling happening here, right?
Yeah. The froth is going over the pasta pot, right?
Yeah, for sure, dude. And it's like it's pretty obvious where it goes from here. Who the heck knows? And then with Aaron's take at the museum, like giving chances to the avant-garde, and because once he accepts it, and I shouldn't say he, but once the museum accepts it, then the old guard tends to think anything new is kind of hodgepodge or like crap, right?
Yeah, you do have the traditionalists, yeah, and then like you're saying, once I've seen it too, like you're saying with Aaron, and that whole facility being kind of I won't say a homing device, but this incubator for these new concepts, because Aaron did the one with World War II and things in that way, and just historical with meets new, like
super smart stuff. Yeah, like couple that with the avant-garde idea and the lab project, which he's been working on for coming on 8 years, probably, the lab project, right? And that, so it's all just, I think it's coming to a head from there. And I even see it more, you see it everywhere, like just on Instagram, you see more people trying to take chances with trees and do funky things. The stuff that Michael Hagedorn is doing is off the charts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a real place for it now, and an audience, I think.
Yeah, that's I'm excited to hear that from your end too, because as you've already had this huge, vast experience and this art career, if I can say that, and then now, exposing yourself to something almost completely opposite with this growing, and things in this industrial versus non-industrial nature component.
Right.
It's really exciting because do you think with your ability to be now into bonsai that other artists in your friend group will start to partake in trees with you or want to be involved?
Guaranteed. I mean, I think it happens. It wouldn't be friends. Friends will sit there and enjoy it. It'll be people that are watching me that want to steal. Right? Yeah. I think it's already happening. I feel like, I mean, I guess the only pat on my back here would be, I feel like I've already, the people are seeing it, and there's already, the ideas I think are already building on what I'm doing. I think. I believe that, and with the 3-4 years that I've been because I've been pushing at all these, the folks, and I see there's a bit of a more of an acceptance. And it comes with at first it was kind of like, oh, well, what is this stuff? And then it's like, well, we could try that too. Right. So comes a couple of years later. And I think that I feel like there's more people willing to take a chance with this stuff now.
Definitely. I would agree. Just from the people I've talked to, the people I've been able to talk to via this platform of the podcast that I started with my friend Ryan, and then just the community, it's a lot of more, I don't like the term younger people, but people, in their 20s and teens are coming into it, and they have a completely different idea about it. They saw it on their phones, not the Karate Kid, right? And it's
right.
It's very interesting because now at school I'm known as the bonsai guy, which is great. I'll wear that title to the end of my days. But in regards to it, it's that other dynamic of how do we keep them involved, right? So I mean, there's a process. Like, what is the process, if you could explain it, of how you do your foundry metal work, right? Do you find the metal first and then go to your shop and then melt it down, or how does that work?
Well, it's all just stuff comes in a truck, Okay. I buy ingot and I buy this. I use some scrap in my work. I don't know. I'm kind of just fly by wire with the art. I work every day as a 9 to 5 on my sculpture. And I couldn't tell you what I'm doing tomorrow other than meetings and schedules. I kind of just take it as it goes. And when it comes to the trees, just building the sculptures is how I learn. And we were making the next sculpture for the museum, and the idea of making it mobile and making it a turntable came to me a week ago. Right. So I was like, okay, so the work begets work, I guess, is what it boils down to.
No. So it just builds on top of everything. Yeah.
And the fact that I'm not teaching or doing other artists' work anymore, this is all I think about are the trees and sculpture at this point in my life.
So you're addicted.
Yeah, beyond it. And even better now is I'm no longer concerned. I mean, I probably shouldn't say this here, but it's just the truth. And I'm no longer concerned so much with, I wouldn't say the health of the tree, but pushing the trees. I feel like I'm still beginner, but I feel like it's time for me to make some bigger bends. You know what I mean?
Yeah, break out of the comfort zone of just I'm okay here. I don't need to go any farther, right?
Right. And that's you say the comfort zone. I was thinking that word was in my mind a couple of seconds ago when we were talking about the COVID thing. And that was what drove me to bonsai most was I'm a guy I had 20 people working for me in my shop, and I was the guy teaching at Columbia, and people were coming to me. That's a church across the street, by the way. And they were coming to me to teach them. And with bonsai, I all of a sudden was the guy in the garden with the sweat rag on, getting yelled at and clean this and clean that. And that was probably the biggest learning artistic moment in the last 20 years of my life. To go back to ground zero and be the apprentice. Yeah, it was really, and I still enjoy it. I mean, like I'll go over to the garden and clean Brooklyn Bonsai, who he's been around, Paul Graviano. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
No, I know Brooklyn Bonsai. I've never met Paul. He sounds like a very nice
fantastic,
person.
Man. He, like, takes care of cat. He has like 1,000 stray cats that he cares for.
That's awesome.
He's got like and he has a really good handle on like what it is that, you know, bonsai is for, you know, maybe the consumer, you know, a really good handle on it. And he's like his business acumen is like he just like he makes cards. He's 80 something years old at this point, you know.
Oh wow, he's been in a long time. I didn't realize he was that old.
He opened in 73.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was probably, I think, 30 something at the time when he opened.
That would do it. That would do it.
Yeah. So, you know, but again, like back to his, like I can go to his garden and he'll have a bunch of stock, whether it's like elephant bush or whatever it is, and there's a level of learning there that I get, right? So, or even just pulling the weeds there. It is like I don't know. It's fun to not have to like have the master problems and have the apprentice problems, because I've been so long. Like I'm not like patting my back. I've been master, right? Like students, they're teaching Columbia grad school. Like that's a master, right? So it's kind of nice to be the schmuck, you know?
No, I dig it. No, it's true, because you know, how long were you doing specific foundry work, you know, within that process of teaching and everything all together? You said 2020 was about the last time that you were teaching, right?
Yeah, I stopped. No, I don't know. I guess I stopped teaching in 21 but yeah, so I started doing foundry in college and I was 19, and I started working at that production foundry at like 23. I started teaching at Pratt right there, right at that moment, you know, and I was probably one of the younger people, and I didn't have a degree, and they hired me without a degree, you know. Nice. And then they found out that me and the dean said, I don't have a degree, man, but they needed someone to run the foundry, you know. So they had a bunch of professors, but no one could fire the furnace. So I was like, I could fire the furnace, you know. So we went in there and we started working, and then I guess other teachers started losing their students to me and found out I didn't have a degree. So that was the first time I got fired from an institution, even though I was hired without a degree.
Yeah.
You know, the dean's like, Mr. Keating, you didn't tell me you didn't have a degree. And I was like, oh, no, I don't, you know. But at Columbia, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
You know, at that level, it doesn't matter.
As long as you have that base of knowledge, right? That's what they want.
Well, they're smart that way. But, you know, at SUNY, you know, I'm never going to get a job with no bachelor's degree, you know. It's not going to happen.
Interesting.
So the idea of stopping teaching, like, kind of was, you know, something to, I don't know. I think maybe I'm going to start again when I get more gray.
Understood. No, that's, you know, you may down the road be teaching some bonsai too.
No, then I would not be a beginner anymore.
Facilitate.
Who told me recently? I asked one of the teachers whether it was, I don't know if it was, I forget who it was, but I was like, I think I'm hitting intermediate, and they're like, you're still a beginner. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stay there. You know what? Let me just stay there. You know, I'll stay on the green slopes, and you know, I could get a helicopter and watch the guys go down the Black Diamond, but just not sure I'm going to get down that course anytime soon. You know,
I will say though, the more you work with, you know, artists and people like Aaron, the more you'll pick up, because you know you've learned that. My chefs told me, hey, if you want to learn what I do, you got to steal it. You know,
what is that? I watched you there.
Oh, I said my chefs told me, hey, you got to steal what I'm doing if you want to learn. And I was like, okay, so the same thing, stealing, you know, in quotes, you're going to be learning from a lot more people just by doing, you know,
right?
And through osmosis, ideally, you're going to pick it up.
No, well, that was my problem. The first 3 years in bonsai was I was scared to do, because I was like, kind of had these plants and I had these ideas for these plants and these containers they were going, and every branch meant so much. And that was where meeting Dan was like, no, dude, you know how to carve, you know how to do this, you just go at it. Like, and you know, maybe something's not going to work out. But I always kind of had this, a more like, before I met Dan, I had a more strict idea of like everything must live, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a point where I realized that there was no way I was going to grow as a bonsai artist unless I kind of took some more chances.
And that's the thing,
You know?
you got to step out, like we're talking about the comfort zone. You got to step out of that, you know. Do you think from your time of living in New York has given you any cause to be just more experimental because it's New York?
I mean, you know, you grow up in this city, there's just a certain anything goes, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, I was in the Palladium at like 13 years old, you know? Like, yeah, like take like, you know, it's like you jump out your window and you go to the Palladium at like 13 and you're out there, you know, in the limelight. Not with 13. What is freshman year? 15, right?
14, 15, yeah.
Yeah. So like at the Palladium nightclub. So that's the beauty of New York. There's a danger, but there's also the idea that anything's possible, you know?
Exploration, right?
Yeah. And like, I'll never forget Julian Schnabel. Like the first time I met him, I was in his house, a famous artist. And he's like, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And I'm like, where, Julian? And he's like, right here. I said, you mean your house? He goes, no, New York, you know? But there's a true sense to like, and I honestly, like, I'm becoming more of a country bumpkin. Like there's certain things I like that are very country, let's say, you know, like things are like, you know, like stuff like going in the woods and taking game home, stuff like that. And part of me wants to leave the city, but a lot of me wants to leave the city, but the artist in me keeps me here. Because where else am I going to go? You know, like once I go to the woods and retreat into that idea, how do I manage the avant-garde? How do I manage the abstract art world? How do I manage the fine art world? Because they'll forget you.
Yeah, I've heard that. You know, one breath, one blink, and you're gone, right? And then
right
in other platforms too. Do you think there's any room for a naturalistic avant-garde in regards to living in the country but being in the process of avant-garde? Because do you ever think you actually lose that sensibility?
No, I'm not worried about the sensibility. I'm worried about the people accepting it because I'm no longer around. Now I'm just some crazy avant-garde country artist with like, you know, building that thing in the you know, the guy in LA building in the desert, right? Or like,
oh yeah, yeah.
So, you know, it becomes, and then there's also a sense of ownership to Brooklyn as a sculptor, being born and raised and knowing that there really aren't that many people my age that are from where I'm from in the art world. That's kind of a reality. Yeah, it's more of the art world, for lack of a better term, is privileged from usually. I mean, Da Vinci was with the Medicis, and you know, it's the majority of my friends that are artists don't come from where I come from.
Right.
That's real, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, CBGB's is gone, that whole scene, you know, the grime, the grit, and the glory is.
Well, beyond, even when that was going on, the majority of artists come from money, dude. It's just what it is. You know, who has the luxury to think of nothing all day long?
That is quite a quote. That's a really.
Yeah. To really bang on it and like really bang on nothing and bang on like what's missing in the world, and like artistically, you either have to be like insane, and it's the same thing with bonsai. Like, you know, the greatest bonsai artists are really rich dudes and really crazy dudes.
Yeah.
That's it, you know?
Or vice versa.
Crazy, I mean, in dedication, Kevin.
Well, yeah, no, it's you know, it's a lifestyle for me, and most people I know who I'm really good friends with in continuation, I know through bonsai. It's really all the people I know anymore. It's like bonsai people, because it's a family, you know, like Chase Rosade, I call him. Yeah, Chase is open all the time. He's a great guy. I mean, within this artist talk we were just discussing, that brings up a new idea in regards to, do you think there's still a place for bonsai in all art, or only specific kinds?
I think it's just everyone has to just like wake up and like everything's the same. I know in art the problem is the collectors don't want to like not. So like, imagine I give you a piece of art and it's got a cat in it, right? Do you like cats, Kevin?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you like ferrets?
Yeah.
No, you like every animal?
Nah, not every animal, but yeah.
What animal don't you like?
Damn. I guess I do like every animal.
Yeah, maybe or something like. But again, I'm giving you a piece of art with a ferret in it.
Okay.
And if you know, like that's kind of my point with that, or like a spider or a cockroach, right?
No,
or
rats. I don't like rats.
Rats. Boom. My grandmother couldn't see him on TV. So now you're a collector, and Ben Keating makes art with rats in it. You got to feed the rat. Forget about most people don't dislike plants, but they know that most people know whether they can take care of a hosta or not, or whether they can I killed 30 spider plants. I tried aloe vera. I had an orchid. I bought a cactus. I had a precumbus juniper that someone bought me in bonsai. They killed them all. Yeah. So now you're going to spend 40 grand on a Ben Keating bonsai sculpture.
Right.
That's called failure right there in the art world. You know?
Right. Well, those are those ones too that in those cases, do you make it a like a set rule that has to stay outside?
Well, no, there's a contract. And it got crazy on that bonsainut.com. Okay. There was an article about me in the New Yorker. Yeah. I please don't go on there. They land-based me really bad. I don't even sign on there. It was like a whole just one day. That article in the New Yorker came out, and they went nuts. Someone called me really bad names. You know, people don't even know who I am. Like it takes a certain type of douchebag and really nasty stuff, dude. Like pages and pages. One guy's like, "Well, I know Jim Doyle, and Jim Doyle speaks highly of him. So I don't know what you guys are saying." And they're like, "He's a scumbag," but the point is that there has to be, I lost my track in thought because they were harassing me. But the idea of
contract. We were discussing the contract and
the idea that maybe the plant would die, right? Mm-hmm. In anyone's tutelage, right? You know, I mean, the plant could be deciding to die 2 years prior, and there's sometimes even Bjorn Orion couldn't save a plant, right? Exactly. When they're going, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So within the contract, it basically says that if you buy one of my sculptures, if the plant dies, I will cast it in metal for you for X amount of dollars, the plant that you killed, and you won't have to play bonsai anymore. And the plant that you killed is in perpetuity in bronze in my container. You're done. Leave the moss on top. Water the moss. Don't water the moss. You'll be fine. You'll have dry moss. You'll have green moss. You'll have whatever moss you have. It'll be there. The bronze tree will be within that composition. Or get with me again. I'll find you another tree through the network. You know, something like good. You know, and we try again. Yeah. So I guess it's an education tool in a weird way. It's like, hey, try this, and if you fail, you could do this. And if you want to keep trying horticulturally, I'll be there to support you. And it's like a contract. And we've sold quite a bunch of these pieces at high dollar, and the people get the contract. And as far as yet, one person killed the tree, and they haven't gotten back to me on what they want to do. I found them 3 replacements and so on and so forth. But again, this person's a billionaire. Like he might not even, so we're not pushing it on people, but it's not a dead end when you buy one of these sculptures from me. And that's kind of back to that blog. They were saying like, what kind of, but they really know what the backstory is. Right. So like, we're telling you like, try. And the whole idea is that anyone that could buy art has a garden too.
Yeah. Well, and so you want, from my understanding what you just said, you want to create it as an avenue for them to explore other possibilities of taking care of this thing to keep it alive.
I prefer. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the ball's in their court, right? And that's with any tree you sell, right? Will there be any time that you would not sell a piece to somebody because you don't think they could keep it alive?
No, because I would cast it in bronze and it's going to outlive any of you guys' trees.
Of course.
Aesthetically.
Yeah.
That's the end result. So who else, any tree out there, who else can guarantee you that if it dies, it's not going to go in the bin? Not going in the bin. It either becomes a learning process in a collector's world. So how could we negate that, right?
Right.
They're trying. They had a high-level tree. They lost. They want to try again. Or they want to give up. And then that high-level tree gets immortalized in bronze.
Yeah, permanence, right?
Permanent. Right. So there's no lack of love, It may seem strange and it may seem kind of outside the norm, but there's no lack of appreciation or like respect for what it is there, you know?
Right. I think there is a line where people sometimes, and I'm not speaking for anybody except myself, by people meaning me, that sometimes I've run into the fact I'm like, am I stuck in a situation where it's me thinking primarily about just keeping the plant alive and the aesthetic different, or is it the aesthetic overpowering my ability to take care of my plant? That's me.
Right. Well, this is the genius of Dan, right?
Yeah.
Back to Dan, because it's not what's the stress, man? What are like Dan said, guys, Dan, what's your what every 2 days? Even when it's hot, he goes every 2 days. Yeah. I said, what about when it was 116 in fucking Portland? Oh, we watered more than every 2 days that week. But it's like that's I guess that's why I really love the idea of that. That's American. Like, that's where I really grew Dan. It's fucking American bonsai, man. It's like rock and roll,
Yeah, and it's that ability to create your own, and that's why I'm excited to see this aspect, because you've had this, we keep talking about your history in your art career, these showings and these galleries, MoMA and things, and you've known people in the fine arts world, and now they're starting to show trees in the fine art galleries too. I know Ryan Neal just did it in Colorado. Bjorn helped with the one in Carolinas. And this exposure, it's great. I just want to see it in this explosion soon, because it feels like a slow burning wick to a bomb. You know what I mean? Like, it's getting there, and then sometimes it stops and you have to relight it. But I think there's another allocation of fun. Everyone, Chase Rosé says, I've never worked a day in my life because I've always had fun playing with little trees. I was like, it's a good application for happiness.
I mean, I could kind of say the same thing, My wife might not be happy to hear it, but yeah, man. I mean, it's my mom got out of the Trade Center in 01. The guy behind her passed, when she was running, and we didn't hear from her until 9:00 that night. And I thought she was gone, and she called me up, and what she said was, Ben, you got it right. You did whatever and she doesn't curse, my mom. She doesn't drink. She don't smoke, It's not like me. And she goes, you had it right since you were young. You do whatever the fuck you want every day. And like this, that's art, and like that's the separation. Because bonsai, you don't do whatever you want every day. If you really care,
Right.
So it becomes a separation. But kind of Dan might do whatever he wants every day. Is he going to pick weeds today? Is he not? Is he going to bullshit all day with someone? Certainly not pining over the trees all day, right?
Yeah, mostly. Yeah. I mean, I know he checks them in the morning, but it's all seasonal practice too, right?
Right. And if one's like kind of, I mean, there wasn't the attention to detail on like decandling and like, I don't know, does that exist there at Elandan Gardens? Like, I'm sure it does, because some of the trees are so complicated, but they're all kind of gnarly, man,
Oh, they all are. Yeah, they all have their own gnarliness imbued in them.
And back to like him putting the arm around your shoulder and saying, look, they're supposed to look dead. Yep. They're not old unless they're dead, right? If it's not apical dead, then it's just a new
young
growth
tree.
Or something.
Yeah.
Your young tree, right? So the age is in the decay.
So would you ever create a piece of art that would decay with a tree?
Yeah, I mean, they all do, because some of them are steel, unfortunately.
Okay, so the rust and then everything else.
Right. The original concept was bronze and indestructible bonsai pot, right? But expensive, and then who's going to pay like $10,000, $5,000 for a bonsai container?
And that's heavy, and things in that way too.
Right, but even on the high end, couple of grand, right? For a really nice nowadays, for a really nice horse, which is well worth. I mean, horse, I think his work could be worth triple more than that, potentially.
Definitely.
I mean, there's the category beyond it, but like, a bronze casting, a 10-inch, like you're already talking a horse cost just to make a 30-inch bronze pot, or 25-inch bronze pot. You're talking $1,500 in production.
Right.
Not made in China, not made in Thailand, they're made in America.
Right.
So I fail to see room in that kind of genre which is what drove me back to fine art, right? And then what drove me to ceramics, the first time I started making ceramics since a kid was to make bonsai pots, So I've been making because I want to try to get my aesthetic in the hands of the masses. And even the steel containers that I'm making right now, they're meant to be accessible. That steel containers, maybe $350, $450 for a 10-inch round planter.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of the idea with the avant-garde with me, with bonsai, is to not shy away. Like, no, it's not. Maybe it's not. Maybe everything's not expensive. It's avant-garde. It's accessible.
Right.
That's really what I'm trying to get to. And it's a struggle because whether I make things in 1 minute or 50 minutes, sometimes they're more valuable to me. And I have the intention to start with give it to Kevin for $350. And then I see it out there and I'm like, I'm going to sell this thing for $350, but it's going to have to take me to let go of this.
Right.
Because if I hold on to it, it's only going to be in high collections. It's only going to be with the people. I have to let go in order to let it grow. And
that's that word, accessibility, right? Because there's so many things. That's what I've been trying to find a way to do, is how do we create more access to it? Because it's really it's so expensive. Like it is that default, because in Japan, there are trees here that would be $4,000 or $5,000 that were going with the exchange rate $900, $800, and they're old. But the duality of that is the fact that Japan has so much of a resource based for bonsai trees because they've had the 1,000 years of practice, right? So they've had so many trees just going into so many people's hands and then in rotation throughout, however many thousands of years. And then here we're still so young that we don't even know where we're going the next day, right?
Right.
They have the application because Japan. When I was, I don't know if you saw any of my pictures online, but
I did. Yeah.
They were showing them in temples. We went to a temple from 1,000+ year old temple almost, and it was the first time they ever showed it in there. That was a beautiful thing. I was like, wow, and they're showing them restaurants and other shrines, and it's like, okay. But also over there, you have trees at graduation ceremonies for high school. You have them in salons. You have all these
also
things.
The tradesman bonsai, that gentleman.
That guy. Yeah,
I've been trying to reach out to him on Instagram, but he hasn't caught me up yet. But he's taken. That's like, I guess that's kind of, in my opinion, that's the idea of the next level in Japan, right? Like he's the young guy. I mean, I don't know much about the culture over there of bonsai, but I see him and I'm like, wow, this guy's really trying to mainstream it, right?
Yeah, because it is sadly decreasing in popularity amongst young people, other than retired age people doing it.
Well, all they need is America to catch on, and then they're just blue jeans for them again. And they're like, wow, we invented the blue jean. This is our blue jean, right? No, but this is the truth. And that, I think that proves to where we're at in the world with it, because if that's said, so like if Japan's already tailing off and we're coming up, they're going to come back around.
Yeah, I did sense
once it becomes the popular culture again here, they're going to pay attention,
Yeah, I mean, everybody is. I mean, we have, like you said, Bjorn, Ryan, Hagedorn, all these really big name people in our backyard, so to speak, and it's that idea of that accessibility for that. You got Mariah Live.
And accessible too. Like, I showed up at Ryan's garden, he met me. I showed up at Randy's place, he met me. I showed up at Jim's, he met me. So there's a level of like, kind of, you're not allowed, but if you show up, you're getting on the field.
Yeah.
You know?
And you come with a kind, a kind speech. It's like, oh, hey, how's your day? You don't want to talk about bonsai all day. Just talk how they're doing as people.
Right. Or like not ask for a picture for Instagram, Right. There's like, but there's a certain level of like, and it's funny you said that it's losing interest in Japan and gaining interest here.
Yeah.
Like but the thing is in Japan, like, I think it's part of the reason we're gaining interest here is because of all the great work that Randy and Andy Smith are doing and Steve Ireland and all those guys, right? And Bob Shimon and all the other people that I don't know that I'm not mentioning, that doesn't exist in Japan anymore. So
a lot of those people passed, sadly.
Well, and the trees they don't exist, right?
Yeah.
There's nowhere to collect anymore. So, you're only dealing with like a Telperian Farms that's 400 years old in Japan, or a Weigert's that's 150 years old. So the styles are set.
Yeah.
Where we're still able to get natural product.
Yeah,
In
that's
Europe
true.
and in America.
Yeah.
So I'm just postulating, but they're stuck because they're stuck in their own tradition. So I think I think if we could like funnel a bunch of pinyon pines and ponderosas and like all these Scots pines and limber pines in Japan, maybe there would be a rejuvenation. Collecting
so. Yeah. That's an interesting concept, because I was talking to my father-in-law about it, because they live up north in the Fukushima prefecture and their countryside. And he told me he has a piece of property on the mountain that he owns, but he doesn't know where it's at. He has to look at a map. And I was like, let's go. He's like, you can't collect though, even though it's my property. It's a crime. You'll either get a big fine or end up in jail. I was like, oh, no thanks. I can go up there and take inspiration, photos and things, but you can only do so much with that. But I will say, out of all the apprentices I've met, they're from other countries going to Japan to get that surplus of tree work and education, and just this proclivity of getting to work on these trees, time and every day, and putting the effort.
Well, again, back to the luxury we are here in America with the craft is that we have. I mean, how many years did Mr. Neal spend in Japan? How many years did Owen Reich spend in Japan? How many years did Bjorn? And they're here now.
Right.
I mean, I don't really know the history, but how many guys or girls have gone through that training and live in America now, other than those dudes? The 7 years.
I was gonna say, you got a few other people. Matt Reel, he studied with Tyler Sherrod down in Carolina, but it's a handful of people,
that really went to Japan and spent. How many years did Owen spend in Japan, or Ryan? Like 7 years, right, or something?
Yeah, Ryan was 6. I think Owen was similar. I know. Yeah, Matt Reel did 8 and stuff, and it's just about this idea of wanting it and this obsession. I don't want to say obsession, but this lifestyle choice.
Yeah,
and now you coming onto the scene with this great pitch out of left field, if you will. Go to the stadium, hit a foul ball to the left field. Oh, it's not foul because I caught it. I get to take it home. Now it's a cool
but
point.
I mean, Nick Lentz threw the pitch.
True, and that just was a.
No, he did, and like but again, the idea of abstraction and to step away from folk, let's call it, for lack of a better word, and not to disrespect anything Nick's done, but it's folky. Majority of New York is very folky, and the majority of experimental bonsai work in this country is very folky. I hope, with the exception of mine. Nothing wrong with folk, but there's a level of like, if you do art for 20 years, you're an artist. So you can't fake that. Just like I can't fake being a 20-year bonsai artist. You can't just step into the idea of making a container and compete with someone who's been making form for 20 years. Or you can't just step into the idea of training a tree out of Colorado and compete with Owen or Ryan or Bjorn. I mean, you'd have to be a real savant to really, and I don't even think that exists, because the motor skills and the whole idea of wiring and the way to do it, and the fact that every tree, trident cut back to 2, elm cut back to 3. Maybe I'm wrong with that, but there's all that stuff that you can't just go whacking at it, So there's like that kind of the beauty of the rules. The rules,
That is the thing too. I know Americans struggle with the rules, because Japan has a lot of rules with culture and identity and everything. I learned a lot more this time when we got married. This time around, I was like, there's a lot more I didn't know that I know now. That
they didn't want to scare you away at first.
It's like, don't tell me he's not ready.
100%. But it's true, and that again, back to I hate to keep harping on Dan, but back to American Japan, and and it's, and I see like Owen I have on speed dial. Like I kind of thankfully have connected with him, and I can call him at any moment and say, what's going on with my trees, which is a huge resource, for him to give me that. And there's a level of like severity when Owen talks to me about a tree where I feel like I'm, he's going to hit my hand or something,
Yeah.
That's there.
Do better. Do better.
That's there. That's
Yeah.
there. Like, and I appreciate that from where it comes from. Because I did that as a sculptor. I spent 7 years getting whipped,
Yeah.
to get to where I am today with form.
Like you're saying, there's then that dexterity of knowing, like you've been doing it 20 plus years, and it comes now natural because you spent the time putting in the work, right?
Well, I mean, but the one thing, bonsai and sculpture have in common is form.
I was just gonna say it's a 3D object comparatively into outside of a 2D form, right?
Yeah, and even containers, in a sense, there's a potter, right? There's a ceramicist, and then there's an artist that works in ceramics. So, it's all very varied, and there's you can make anyone can make a pot tomorrow.
Yeah,
easily.
Yeah.
Right. Whether it may not be high fire raku like the stuff I'm doing now, but you can still make a pot. So if I'm going to dive into ceramics as a sculptor, I'm going to say, well, what's no one doing? Well, high fire raku. Who's doing that? I don't see many people doing that. I think Horst might have a few examples of it, So like, okay, so I go right back to one of my friends says, oh, I saw Horst might have done some pieces like that, right? So now I know, well, that's the right direction because the top potter in the world is trying it potentially. Whether I know that, I'm not sure if I'm just saying that because my friend told me that.
Right.
But so that was where I drove into ceramics, like high fire raku. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And when I met with Ryan out there, I was like, oh, I'm doing these high fire raku pots. Impossible. What's the temperature of it? Do you want to see? I don't want to see it. Let me see the sculpture. Like there wasn't even the high fire raku. They were only doing teapots, this big high fire raku, right?
Right.
Who are like we're dragging out. I don't know if you saw the videos of the high fire raku we're doing.
I was gonna say, there's a friend of mine named Brandon Stolini. I can't pronounce his last name, but he does high fired potware and bonsai pots over in Connecticut. He's been doing
raku.
Like high fire wood burn everything.
And he's pulling them out and then putting them in the reduction.
I believe so. Yeah, there's a whole process. Yeah,
it's a whole process. We've been figuring out, and it's like it's a big because we're doing some 30-inch pots, which means you need to drag it out. You need to drag this 30-inch pot out of at 3,000 degrees.
I was gonna say a wood-fired ceramic.
we're firing gas.
Oh, you are? Okay.
We gas fire to get them up to 3,000. Then they go on a trolley into the raku furnace, and then get dumped on. I'll send you the video. It's on Instagram somewhere. I'll send it to you after we get off.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. I'd be interested in where is he at, the other gentleman?
He's in Collinsville, Connecticut. I'm looking at his stuff right now. I can send you his stuff on Instagram if you want. He's a good dude. He makes sake cups, a lot of great bonsai, like gnarly looking pots.
Smaller stuff though, right?
He's got some bigger ones. He hasn't been able to, he does it as a community based thing where it's a group of people, so you have to fit in all your pots there, but you can't just take because that's your one piece, right? You got to have multiple if you want to sell them.
Dude, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, so we're dumping like sometimes we're doing 3 pots in a 4 foot by 4 foot but 7 foot kiln.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah. Well, that is a bit different then. Yeah. Okay.
Well, you need air. You can't clog them in there. They need to have air, right? I mean, if you have a big pot, we're getting maybe 3 or 4 a level. So we're firing up to 3,000 3 pots and then racking them over, But the majority of the work I'm doing in Mexico, and that helps. Again, back to the bottom line. If I was doing it in America, these pots would be thousands of dollars. There'd be no way around it. Right. So I travel to Mexico, and again, it's all just to make it accessible.
Right.
I'm going there because I don't want to make another $4,000 pot. Like it's just not. Right. I mean, I have $50,000 piece of artwork. I don't want. It's not going to play for me to try and make super expensive pots. But I'd like to make pots that are super expensive looking but obtainable.
Open to the masses, right?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of my dream. It's a hard fight, but that's kind of my dream.
Have you been through this idea you have now? Have you been? I don't say ridiculed, but has the fine art world that you've been accessed to? Have they treated you different, or is it just like how is it different now for you?
I don't know. I mean, it's funny because there's a larger tree that we're trying to place, and the the curator of the museum was like, I just don't know if I like the tree, Ben. I'm like, what? That's what I'm hearing from the bonsai people. Like the first show we did, and that was part of the thing. Like, this guy's selling Walmart bonsai for like $15,000. Someone wrote, and like, no, it wasn't a Walmart bonsai. It was a tree I paid $1,500 for from someone that bought it off Andy Smith 10 years ago.
Yeah,
and got the ponderosa needles down to like a nice, they weren't all garbage,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but that was the kind of the thing was that it was so yeah, you're always struggling with that. People are going to try and identify something with what you're doing.
Right.
That was the big tree. Ben, I don't know if the tree, it's a giant bonsai, so it's going to take 10 years for me to make this piece. Like, do you want to be a part of it or not? And whoa,
yeah. Do you think people do that just to try to be able to understand it in their own mind, just like take it apart, or not take it apart?
Well, they do it not. Yeah, I guess not understanding is what causes, and that's the biggest problem with new art, or like anyone's gonna understand the Jeff Koons, right? You saw it at Toys R Us. Anyone's gonna understand the Daniel Ashram, it's Venus de Milo, okay, but you show them something they've never seen before, it creates complexities.
When they get uncomfortable.
Yeah, it makes them uncomfortable. It's the tabula rasa. It's the romantic's dream, right? It's like people don't like to be at the tabula rasa. It's a blank slate. But that's the driving factor in all my work, is to put you in that moment where like, maybe I never saw this before.
Yeah.
So, which drives me back to the greater bonsai professionals. Like, let me get my work inside, because they're doing work that's never been seen before.
Right. Pushing the boundaries.
Yeah. Pushing boundaries, like especially Dan. Whereas there's no, and I asked Dan, I said, can I get one of my containers? He gave me a definite maybe, which I think is a big deal.
No, from Dan, that is a big deal.
Wasn't a no.
He's like, let me think of it. It was probably like, maybe, that face. I know that. I've seen that.
He goes, let me tell you, man, it's a definite maybe, And the only struggle was that I'm not naturalistic, really. Had my work been more naturalistic, he told me, he's like, if it looked like that, I'd put it in there right away. But boom, that got me thinking, like, how can I blend my aesthetic with the naturalistic bonsai aesthetic and take that to another level too, and try and make Dan happy without sacrificing my tenets of abstraction.
Right.
Not just to make him a bird's nest or a bunch of, like, he'd be happy with a big log cast in metal, boom, throw it on the floor. But I could do that, but that starts to go against my tenets.
Right.
Which have no basis on history or have no basis on anything logical, right?
Right.
But that's the make-believe that we kind of ponder upon in art.
Well, as you said earlier, artists get to think about nothing all day.
Nothing. My favorite word.
Oh man, this is a great conversation.
No, thanks for having me, man.
No, yeah, I appreciate it. It's been an hour and a half. I went by so fast.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's almost 7. I was like, oh my.
Holy shit, I gotta cook dinner, dude.
I was like, I gotta eat.
I guess it's order pizza time because we're in America,
Pretty much. Domino's or something better.
Look, you want to laugh at like the dedications? My son wrote this to me.
That is amazing. You got to post that on Instagram. That's right there.
He spelled hungry wrong. He's only in 3rd grade.
Hey, it works for me. You know what he wants. A kid that knows.
Sorry, buddy.
A kid that knows what he wants is good. Where can people find you? What can people see your stuff?
The Pacific Bonsai Museum, and galleries and assorted museums thereafter. I don't have a huge web presence, but just Google my name, I'm there,
Ben Keating, right?
Yeah, Benjamin Keating. I think there's a website, benjaminkeating.com, benjaminkeatingstudio.com. But whatever, just Google it and come to Brooklyn and find me, say hello. It'd be the most important thing to do.
Definitely, yeah.
Today's episode was recorded, edited, and produced by Ryan Houston, Kevin Ferris, and Kelly Louie. To find out more and see pictures relevant to today's topic or sponsors, see the show notes linked in the description or at bonsaitimepodcast.com. To submit questions, suggestions, or tree pictures for future discussion, find the contact form also on our website, or message us directly at bonsaitimepodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to support us in making more episodes, consider rating us, sharing with friends, donating, or becoming a sponsor. Our music was provided by Mini Cancer. To find more of their work, check out their SoundCloud and Bandcamp pages. To stay in touch with us, subscribe to us in your podcast app, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at Bonsai Time Podcast, or on TikTok at Bonsai Time Pod. Also, Kevin and Kelly are at Kevin_FerrisPNW and Bonsai with Kelly, respectively, on Instagram. And Ryan is invivobonsai.com and on all social media. Remember, have fun and bonsai on.